the death penalty today. Thank you. Bang! One of your loved ones has just been shot in cold blood. I'm sure you would all demand justice for such a heinous crime, and many of you would want the individual responsible to lose their life as well. I will convince you that capital punishment does not sufficiently punish first-degree murders and should be done away with. This is important for everybody to know and to understand, because whether we realize it or not, we are all impacted by the effects of this flawed practice. You can trust me on this matter because I present this argument today based on a solid foundation, and this is not infected by biases or personal background. During the speech, we will discuss the ways in which capital punishment fails to provide a sufficient punishment to people who commit first-degree murder. Then we will discuss a solution to this problem in the form of an alternative sentence. Then I will show you the many multifaceted benefits that society will reap as a result of this change. First, it's imperative to understand why capital punishment, understandably a natural reaction for the family of a loved one who is killed, does not provide the level of justice that most people believe that it does. Capital punishment does not provide sufficient punishment to those who commit first-degree murder. It is commonly accepted that murder is the ultimate crime, and the only rational punishment is the ultimate punishment, death. The highly respected Roman philosopher Cicero expresses as early 106 BC that the punishment should match the crime. This reasoning has been used to justify capital punishment since the dawn of recorded history. If somebody commits a horrible crime, the punishment should be equally as severe. Furthermore, Louis Pojman, award-winning philosopher and published author, wrote the book Debating the Death Penalty, Should America Have Capital Punishment? That the state not only has the authority to execute murderers, but that it has a responsibility to do so. Supporters of the death penalty feel that a murderer has forfeited the right to life when he or she stole the life of another. They deserve the most severe punishment possible. If first-degree murderers indeed deserve the most severe punishment possible, capital punishment fails to adequately meet that standard. According to the Northwestern Journal of Law and Social Policy and to the 2009 article, the life of a person on death row is drastically different than the life of a person facing life without parole. Inmates on death row are afforded a cell to themselves that is generally shared by 2 inmates serving any other sentence. Additionally, these inmates are allowed 3 visits a week compared to the 1 or 2 afforded prisoners serving LWOP. Life without parole. Would you really want such privileged living conditions given to the person that ended the life of someone you loved? Since capital punishment in the U.S. is a broken, insufficient punishment for the crime of first-degree murder, let's take a look at a more viable alternative that will more effectively punish first-degree murder. Capital punishment should be replaced with a sentence of life without parole, or LWOP in the U.S. The plan is to eliminate the use of the death penalty as a punishment for first-degree murder in the United States and replace it with a sentence of LWOP. According to a Prison Journal article from 2008, each state that still uses the death penalty also allows the option for LWOP, and the only regress for a person with a sentence is death unless he or she is pardoned for their sentence. This means that the change would have zero effect on the civilian populace, as the convicted killers would remain behind bars until their deaths. Since murder is not a federal crime, this change would take place either on the state level, by state statute, or by ruling of the federal Supreme Court. In this case of Gregg v. George in 1976, the court held that the death penalty is not a form of punishment that may never be imposed, which was a direct contradiction to the feeling of Furman v. Georgia in 1972. This provides that the Supreme Court of the U.S. does have the ability to rule that capital punishment is unconstitutional, effectively abolishing the practice. This option is far more efficient because it would remove the toilsome act of changing law in each individual state. This would simply require a barred attorney to choose to represent a person charged and convicted of first-degree murder and argue this case in front of the Supreme Court. In a 2000 article from the William and Mary Law School Respiratory, the court's interpretation of the 18th Amendment has changed since 1976. which opens the door for yet another decision regarding the death penalty to be passed down that contradicts the one passed down in Gregg v. Georgia. Since the meaning of the Eighth Amendment banning cruel and unusual punishment now derives its meaning from the evolving standards of decency that marks the progress of maturing society, it is more than possible that an attorney could convince the court that capital punishment has become impractical to enforce due to the evolving standards of decency present in today's society. This would be a long process in and of itself, but the benefits to society would be enormous, both socially and economically. The replacement of the death penalty with LWOP would therefore create extremely noticeable benefits socially and economically for all taxpayers, which will or does include all of you. As we've discussed already, first-degree murders would receive a harsher and more immediate punishment, which would give peace of mind to the families of their victims. In the aforementioned article from the Prison Journal, inmates who were sentenced to LWOP, as well as inmates on death row, were interviewed and provided overwhelming evidence that inmates facing LWOP are more miserable than inmates facing execution. One person even said to me, "The death penalty is the easy way out." If we place ourselves in the shoes of a family member of a person whose life was taken by another, most of us would want the murderer to face the most excruciating punishment possible. LWOP provides that punishment, and that is a victory for the victim, and especially for those who experience the pain of being robbed of someone they truly love. The elimination of capital punishment would mean the elimination of the lengthy, expensive court proceedings that occupy them, as well as the expensive living conditions on death row. A 2009 article from the Northwestern Journal of Law and Social Policy reports that the average yearly cost of housing and feeding a normal inmate is roughly $23,000 a year. But the cost of housing a death row inmate, coupled with his or her multitude of trials, more than doubles that cost. If states were to do away with capital punishment, these unnecessary costs would dissipate, thus allowing them to allocate those funds to more worthy projects such as education or infrastructure. In a time when the economy is so rough, it would be amazing to have extra money to spend on areas that actually benefit society. In conclusion, we have discussed the major problems associated with the ineffective practice of capital punishment. Then we discussed a plan of action to tackle removing the sentence and replacing with LWOP, life without parole. And lastly, we talked about the benefits that would come about if this change was to occur. I ask you all to take all this information I have shown you today and truly think of how fitting of a change this would be for our nation, and to further education yourselves on this matter so that you can join me in making informed decisions regarding the treatment of first-degree murders. Think back to the gunshot you all heard earlier that took the life of your loved one. Based on what you've just heard, this is the death penalty really enough to justly punish them. Thank you for listening today. My name is Amanda Garletts. Thank you. Have a good night.